Let's do a few more questions here, man. WDW Plantoons says, was there ever corporate training programs at Turner? How did you navigate the transition from announcing to producing to being an executive within Turner Corporate? That's something we never talked about. Were there any classes?
not not traditional classes, but there were probably once or twice a year. Human resources would require that executives attended, I guess, classes, if you will, seminars, probably a better way to say it, in terms of how to best deal with sexual harassment situations and that type of HR issue. Those happen frequently. And you do some role playing, that was always kind of silly and fun. I found them to be interesting and helpful in my case because I'd never worked in a corporate environment before, and there are issues in a corporate environment, particularly a publicly held company, that you just really have to be aware of that you probably wouldn't think about or deal with in the course of your normal everyday life, as a private citizen or working for a small company, or in my case, being self-employed. So I found those to be helpful. But beyond that, no, there was no, I get a lesson every day. I was being schooled by all kinds of people within Turner Broadcasting, especially early on, about how Turner functioned and my responsibilities within the team and things like that. Harvey Schiller taught me a lot. Bill Shaw taught me a lot. Bill Shaw was really a mentor for me. Of course, Bill Shaw was a VP of Human Resources for Turner Broadcasting. So my first year or so, 18 months with WCW, I was under the direct mentorship, tutelage, if you will, of Bill Shaw. So I learned a lot from Bill, but it wasn't really in a classroom type of setting.
Here's an interesting question we've never discussed before. OPW Chris says AEW pay per views were broadcast in movie theaters the past few years. Now it looks like theater showings have come to an end. From outside looking in, and as someone who has run a company, why would one eliminate guaranteed revenue? Bars and restaurants are still paying to show it. I think the answer here, Eric, is, as you know, AEW licenses real music. They're not just using Mikey Ruckus and in-house musicians to create theme songs. So because they're actually licensing music, I think the license to air on television is different than the license to air in a theater. That's what I've been told.
Either that or nobody's coming to the theater to watch it.
Oh, will you stop?
No, I mean, that's the other option. What you said could be true. That could be the issue. I kind of don't think so, but it's possible. Because usually distribution agreements when it comes to licensing include all kinds of potential distribution or presentation opportunities. They're very much of a blanket. Now, perhaps with regards to some of that music, there were restrictions on it, which would prevent their product from being shown in a theater if that music is utilized. That is a possibility. I don't think so. I think it's just the case that, yeah, they're shown in theaters, but nobody's coming to watch. And if I own a theater and I'm spending money to present a product and there's only 4 people there, I'm probably not going to do it for very long. That's my bet.
I think movie theaters are looking for anything they can get these days. It does feel like they're on their last legs, but the word I got was like a song like Seek and Destroy, because that's the biggest one that comes to mind, because Sting just used it on the most recent pay-per-view in the main event. I don't think they had permission. I think it's a whole new set of expenses to show it in the theater. And I would guess whatever that cost is doesn't really warrant the need.
Well, then you'd have to do some math, right? You'd have to break out your calculator and go, wait a minute, I'm spending all this money for music. It's not really helping my television ratings much. I can't really bring people to the arenas. That's dying. Now I can't go to a movie theater because I want to use music, certain music. Why not quit using that music? Because it's not working for you anyway, dude. It's not generating revenue. So why do it?
Because he wants to.
Huh?
I know this sounds silly, but it's the same reason he started AEW. He wants to.
Well, then great.
I mean, I know that sounds crazy, but you and I are approaching a lot of these conversations from a pragmatic business owner standpoint.
Mhm.
This is a cat who realistically has infinite money. So why'd you play that theme song? It costs a lot of money because I wanted to. Okay.
Okay, so he's a money mark that can do whatever he wants, and he's not responsible to anybody but himself because he wants to. That's fine. That's just
Oh,
fine.
God, that's
Good for
crazy.
him. I mean, are you gonna? I mean, is there anybody? If you Googled money mark and Tony Khan's picture doesn't come up, I don't know whose would. This guy is the personification of money mark. I don't know. I don't know
Yeah,
how anybody could deny that.
but well, listen, if you allegedly there's been business valuations done of this company. Now, listen, I know you're laughing, but here's what I'm saying. Remember, once upon a time, they said Twitter was worth all this cash, but it was still
Okay,
hemorrhaging cash every year. I mean, a lot of these startups and tech companies, they'll tell you, "Oh, we've got this so and so $1 billion valuation." Well, how do your books look? Well, we lost 50 million last year. Now,
but come on, Conrad, you
I'm
know
just
better.
saying, you and I, as
You
small,
know better.
I don't know better because I don't know.
Are you going to compare a wrestling company to a tech startup when tech's got all the potential in the world? A wrestling company it's a television show. Tony Khan is nothing more and nothing less than an independent television producer that's producing a television show. Let's quit trying to pretend he's something else. That's all it is. And it's
But
not working.
well, yeah,
It's
but here's all right. I'm not arguing it's not working for you. But if he's about to get a renewal, if he is going to get a
yeah,
renewal, it's working for someone. But what
yeah.
I'm saying is, true or false, Tony Khan has gotten the second largest television rights for wrestling in the history of wrestling on television, besides WWE, obviously.
Sure.
So, I mean, by definition,
But he's losing money doing it. But go
well, we
ahead.
don't know. We don't know how much he's losing. We don't know his book.
Yeah, okay.
I
That's
mean,
it.
we can guess they're losing money. But
We
we don't
can
know.
be pretty accurate in an assumption that they're losing money. It's the words we choose. Words have meaning. If he was making money, we would all know about it, and Dave would be shouting it from the mountaintops. His little puppy, Dave Meltzer, he'd be shouting it from the mountaintops. Tony Khan is not making money; he's losing money, and is going to continue losing money. So the idea that somehow he's got this television company, a production company that's producing professional wrestling that can't draw people to the arena consistently, that's deteriorating in the ratings on a regular basis, and is overall kind of mismanaged from the outside looking in, that has some kind of relative value to a startup tech company or to a sports organization. Kind of Dave Meltzer's saying, yeah, but what about all these sports companies that are, these teams and the value of teams? It's not a fucking team. It's not a sport. It's a television company that produces professional wrestling, and it's doing so on a really, really shaky basis. To suggest that there's some kind of intrinsic value and it's going to be worth billions of dollars because, I don't know, a startup tech company follows that kind of
Oh, no,
model.
no, that's not what I said, Eric. Now, come on. What I said was I made the analogy that when something's new, it takes a few years before it becomes profitable. And if he gets this big, like if you were an NFL player and you're going to get drafted here in a few weeks, everybody knows you're working for that second contract. That's where you make your big, like, lifetime money. The first contract's good, gets you in the game, you prove your worth. The second contract's where you cash in. I got to think that's what Tony's thinking here. And that's probably what he and his dad have seen time and time again in their management of real sports.
Well, I'd sign up for that if there was growth. If there was an indication that Tony's toy box was growing and was becoming more successful, if there was any indication that there was growth in the future, I would tend to want to believe that. But the opposite is true. And anything, this, Conrad, way better than I do. Value is relative. Something is only as valuable as somebody else is willing to spend on it.
Yeah, it's true.
And if you look at what AEW is, if you look at the expenses, look at their video game, which by the way, we don't hear much about that video game, do we? Because they lost a fucking fortune doing it because they don't know what they're doing. They were incompetent in its design and implementation. It failed miserably and they spent a fortune. I've heard the number from people in the industry. I'm not going to repeat it because I don't know it's a fact and I don't do that shit. That's what Dave Meltzer does. But if the number that I heard from 3 different sources is close to being accurate, it was a disaster. And then you look at everything else around AEW that's not working, as we've discussed, it's only worth what somebody's able to pay for it. And why would anybody want to spend any amount of money on that company unless you're Tony Khan and you grew up fantasizing about being a wrestling promoter and now your dad gives you $1 billion and you can go do whatever the fuck you want to do. That's what it is. It's a really well-funded independent wrestling company that's run by a guy who is a fan of wrestling or money mark. That's what it is. And to suggest that that's going to be worth billions of dollars because WWE is, or because a hockey team is, or because a soccer team is just another. That's kind of like the cage match reference. Yeah, just go look at the value of professional sports leagues, and then tell me AEW is not worth more money. I mean, all right, it's the cage match rankings analogy.
Well, I mean, listen, you and I both know there have been a few people who are interested in buying AEW. I mean,
Really? I don't know that.
You and I talked about it before. I'll
We
remind
did?
you out there. Yeah.
No, I'm interested.